It is late autumn in the limestone valleys of what we now call southwestern France, roughly 30,000 years ago. The air is sharp, tasting of wet stone and dying leaves. A small group of foragers moves through the thinning forest, their breath blooming in white clouds as they scan the ground for any remaining source of calories before the deep freeze sets in. One of them spots a cluster of low-growing plants with broad, heart-shaped leaves and bright, waxy berries. They look lush. They look heavy with energy. In a world where every single calorie is the difference between surviving February and becoming a footnote in the permafrost, the temptation to reach out and pluck those berries is an physical ache. But the forager stops. They wait. They look for a sign that isn't there, and eventually, they walk away. This scene, or one just like it, played out millions of times across the hundreds of thousands of years of human prehistory. It represents one of the most successful, high-stakes cold cases in the history of our species. We are the only primates that have managed to colonize every single ecological niche on the planet, from the frozen tundra to the airless peaks of the Andes. To do that, we had to solve a mystery that should have been impossible to crack. We had to look at a world filled with thousands of plant species, the vast majority of which are either completely indigestible or actively trying to kill us, and somehow identify the tiny fraction that wouldn't stop our hearts or melt our livers. There were no labels. There were no manuals. There was only a silent, green landscape that offered no margin for error. To understand how they did it, we have to look at the first clue in our investigation, the chemical scanner built directly into the floor of your mouth. For a long time, the standard explanation was that humans simply avoided anything that tasted bitter. It's a clean, logical theory. Most plant toxins, like alkaloids and cyanogenic glycosides, have a sharp, unpleasant bitterness to them. We evolved roughly 25 different types of bitter taste receptors, known as the TAS2, our family, to act as a biological tripwire. If the tripwire is hit, we gag, we spit, and we survive. Case closed, right? Not exactly. If our strategy was as simple as bitter equals death, we would never have survived as a species because we would have walked away from some of the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth. This is where the investigation takes a strange turn. In 2013, a team of geneticists led by Sarah Tishkoff at the University of Pennsylvania conducted a massive study on the TAS2R38 gene, which controls how we perceive a specific bitter compound. They found that a mutation allowing humans to perceive this bitterness appeared roughly 1 million years ago, long before modern Homo sapiens even walked the Earth. But they also found that large portions of the population carry a version of the gene that makes them bitter-blind to certain compounds. If bitterness was our only sieve for catching poison, why would evolution allow millions of us to lose that ability? The mystery deepens when you realize that many of the most lethal toxins in nature, like the ones found in certain mushrooms or the deadly nightshade family, don't actually taste that bad. Some are even described as slightly sweet. This means our ancestors were using a sieve that was fundamentally broken. It was catching some of the pebbles, but letting the fine sand of lethal poison slip right through. This realization forces us to look beyond biology and into the realm of a much more sophisticated, cognitive detective work. If the tongue was a faulty sieve, the next clue points toward the brain. This leads us to a fascinating series of experiments conducted at Yale University by researchers Annie Wirtz and Karen Wynn. They wanted to know if humans are born with a botanical blueprint, a built-in set of rules for handling the mystery of plants. They worked with 18-month-old toddlers, children who hadn't yet been sat down and lectured on the dangers of the woods. When these children were presented with a variety of unfamiliar objects, including man-made items and realistic-looking plants, their behavior was startlingly consistent. They would happily grab a toy, a tool, or a strange household object almost immediately. But when it came to the plants, they hesitated. They wouldn't touch them. This, botanical neophobia, wasn't just general caution. It was a surgical, category-specific fear. The researchers found that the toddlers were waiting for a very specific social signal. If an adult took a piece of the plant and pretended to eat it, the children's hesitation vanished instantly. This suggests that the real sieve wasn't just what we felt on our tongues, but a complex system of social surveillance. We didn't just learn what was safe, we learned how to watch others learn. This psychological sieve acted as a collective memory bank. An individual didn't have to risk their life by tasting a strange berry because they could simply look at the oldest member of the tribe. If the elder didn't touch it, it was as if the plant didn't exist. This sounds like a perfect system, but it still leaves a gaping hole in our investigation. At some point, someone had to be the first person to try it. Someone had to be the one who didn't have an elder to watch. How did those pioneers bridge the gap between a complete unknown and a dietary staple? This brings us to the third clue, the concept of outsourced testing, or what we might call the witness sieve. For generations, the popular theory was that humans simply watched what animals ate. If a bird ate a berry and lived, it was safe for us. It's a beautiful, intuitive idea, but it's also a potential death trap. This is the false lead in our mystery. Modern toxicology tells us that different species have wildly different metabolic pathways. A squirrel can eat mushrooms that would turn a human's internal organs into liquid. Birds can eat berries that contain concentrations of alkaloids that would cause a human to go into respiratory failure. If our ancestors had relied purely on animal observation, the human story would have ended in a mass poisoning event long before the invention of the wheel. However, anthropologists studying groups like the Hadza in Tanzania or indigenous communities in the Amazon have noticed a more nuanced version of this strategy. They don't just watch any animal, they watch specific ones. Primates, like baboons or monkeys, have digestive systems that are much closer to ours. When our ancestors watched a Capuchin monkey navigate a forest, they weren't just looking for what the monkey ate, they were looking for how the monkey prepared the food. They watched as monkeys rubbed certain leaves to remove stinging hairs or waited for a fruit to reach a specific stage of ripeness. This was a more refined version of the sieve, but it still couldn't explain how we learned to eat foods that no other animal on Earth touches. This is where the detective work gets truly gritty, moving from observation into the realm of intentional, dangerous experimentation. We have to talk about the chemical forge, the moment where we stopped searching for safe food and started creating it. This is perhaps the most impressive part of the mystery. Consider the cassava root. Today, it provides the primary source of calories for over 800 million people. It is also, in its raw state, a chemical weapon. Cassava contains high levels of cyanogenic glycosides. If you eat it raw, your body converts those compounds into hydrogen cyanide. It stops your cells from using oxygen. You suffocate from the inside out while breathing perfectly fine. There is no animal in the world that has a natural process for cooking or processing cassava. And yet, ancient humans in the Amazon basin figured out a multi-step, days-long detoxification process that involves grating, soaking, fermenting, and heating the root until the cyanide is gasified and released. There is no way to stumble upon this process. If you stop at step 2, you die. If you forget step 4, you get sick. This wasn't a lucky guess. This was a systematic investigation. Researchers believe this was achieved through a process of incremental testing. They would take a tiny, infinitesimal amount of a substance and place it on the skin to check for irritation. If nothing happened, they would place it on the lips. Then the tongue. Then they would swallow a tiny amount and wait 24 hours. This is the same protocol used by modern special forces in survival situations today, but our ancestors were doing it with an entire forest of possibilities. They were the world's first chemists, working in a laboratory where the price of a failed experiment was your life. This cultural sieve transformed the deadly into the daily. The metaphor of the sieve helps us understand how these layers of defense work together, but we still haven't found the smoking gun, the one piece of evidence that explains why we were so much better at this than any other species. The answer lies in the invention of fire, but not for the reasons you might think. We often talk about fire as a way to make food taste better or to kill bacteria. But in the context of our mystery, fire was the ultimate investigative tool. As the Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham argues in his research on cooking as a biological necessity, fire didn't just cook food, it unlocked it. Heat breaks down complex plant defenses like cellulose and many alkaloids that the human gut simply cannot handle. Once we had fire, the sieve changed. We didn't have to find food that was safe, we had to find food that fire could make safe. This narrowed the mystery significantly. It turned the entire landscape into a potential pantry, provided we knew the right temperature to unlock it. But even with fire, we were still missing one crucial element. All the genetic receptors, social learning, and fire in the world wouldn't matter if we didn't have a way to store that data over thousands of years. This leads us to the most unsettling part of the investigation, the cost of the map. Every safe food we eat today is a monument to a nameless ancestor who took a risk and failed. The map of safe food was written in the blood of the people who guessed wrong. This wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was a brutal, generational call. The people whose TAS2R receptors were too dull to detect the bitterness of a lethal alkaloid didn't survive to have children. The children who didn't have the botanical neophobia to stay away from the strange berries didn't survive to become elders. We are the descendants of the people who were just cautious enough, just observant enough, and just lucky enough to pass the test. But that still didn't explain the most baffling part of the puzzle. Why is it that some of the most dangerous foods are the ones we crave the most? This is the big reveal in our investigation, the twist that reframes everything we've talked about. We've been looking at this as a story of humans trying to avoid poison. But it turns out the plants were also trying to communicate with us. This is a concept known as co-evolutionary signaling. Plants didn't just evolve toxins to kill everything. They evolved specific compounds to deter some animals while attracting others. A chili pepper didn't develop capsaicin to be delicious in a salsa. It developed it to burn the mouths of mammals while remaining perfectly invisible to birds, who don't have the receptors to feel the heat. Birds eat the peppers, fly away, and poop out the seeds, spreading the plant. Mammals chew the seeds and destroy them, so the plant developed a way to scream at us in the language of pain. Our ancestors, in a move of pure investigative genius, eventually learned to ignore the scream and find the value underneath. We turned the plant's defense mechanism into a culinary preference. This shows that the sieve wasn't just about filtering out the bad, it was about learning to read the environment's intentions. We became the only species on Earth that actively seeks out the very compounds that were designed to keep us away. We didn't just solve the mystery of what was safe, we conquered the mystery by learning how to enjoy the danger. This brings us to the verdict of our investigation. How did ancient humans know which food was safe? They didn't know in the way we know things today. They didn't have a list. They were the list. They were a walking, breathing data set of 1,000,000 years of trial and error. The sieve wasn't a single thing, it was a layered defense system. It was the bitterness on the tongue, the hesitation in the toddler's hand, the sight of a monkey eating a fruit, the heat of the fire, and the stories told around that fire for 10,000 generations. It was a massive, collective effort of observation and risk that transformed a hostile, poisonous planet into a home. We often think of ourselves as separate from the natural world, as if we stepped out of it once we started farming. But the truth is, every time you walk down a grocery aisle, you are using a mental map that took more lives to create than every war in human history combined. You don't have to worry if the spinach is going to paralyze you because someone 10,000 years ago found out the hard way so you wouldn't have to. You are walking through a world that has been meticulously scrubbed of its lethality by the people who came before you. Case closed. We found the answer in the interaction between our DNA, our culture, and our courage. But that discovery only leads to another, perhaps even stranger mystery. If we spent 1,000,000 years perfecting the art of identifying safe, natural food, why is it that in the last 50 years, we've managed to create a new category of food that our biological sieves don't recognize at all? We've built a world of ultra-processed sugars and synthetic fats that bypass every single one of those ancient warning systems. Our bitter receptors don't fire. Our botanical neophobia doesn't kick in because the food doesn't look like a plant. We've effectively hacked our own investigative equipment. We are now living in the first era in human history where the most dangerous things we can eat are the ones that taste the best. We've solved the mystery of the forest, but we are currently failing the mystery of the supermarket. The ancient world was a place where nature tried to kill you with its defenses, but the modern world is a place where we are killing ourselves with our own inventions. Our ancestors would be baffled by the fact that we have all the information they lacked, Yet we are more confused about what to eat than they ever were. They navigated a landscape of literal poison with nothing but their senses and their stories, and they succeeded. We navigate a landscape of abundance with science and technology, and we are struggling. It makes you wonder if the sieve only works when the stakes are high enough to matter. We should be grateful for the map they left us, even if we are currently using it to walk in circles. Every bite you take is a legacy of a struggle you will never truly understand. You are eating the results of a million-year-long war. If you found this investigation into our ancestral survival strategies fascinating, you might want to look into the mystery of why humans are the only species that actually enjoys the taste of pain in the form of spicy food, a topic we'll be diving into very soon. There's a strange, hidden logic to why we crave the things that should hurt us, and it's a story that goes much deeper than just flavor. Until then, you might want to pay a little more attention to that instinctive wrinkle of your nose when you taste something bitter. It's not just a preference, it's a message from a ghost who died so you could live. Feel free to subscribe and join us for the next deep dive into the strange history of our species. Every single meal you have ever eaten was paid for by someone who didn't survive the test. The investigation into ancient human food safety reveals that our survival was never a matter of luck, but a relentless, multi-generational interrogation of the natural world. We utilized a series of biological and social sieves to filter out the lethal, transforming ourselves from vulnerable primates into the world's most versatile omnivores. We learned to read the chemical language of plants and the behavioral cues of our kin, building a massive, invisible library of survival that we still carry in our genes today. This journey from the first bitter taste to the mastery of fire and fermentation is the most important story we have, even if we've forgotten most of the chapters. It's a reminder that we are built for a world of high-stakes choices, and our current environment of easy, synthetic abundance is a profound deviation from the path that made us human. We are the survivors of a million-year-long experiment. Everything you have ever put in your mouth is a piece of a map written in the corpses of the people who were wrong. We have explored the genetic tripwires on our tongues, the social caution of our infants, and the chemical ingenuity of our ancestors who learned to cook the poison out of the world. Each of these clues points toward the same conclusion, that the human species is defined by its ability to turn a hostile environment into a resource through collective intelligence. We are the masters of the sieve, the creatures who can extract nourishment from the most unlikely and dangerous places. But our investigation doesn't end with the past. It continues every time we make a choice about what to fuel our bodies with. The mystery of what is safe has evolved, but the underlying tension between our ancient instincts and our modern reality remains. We are the descendants of the world's most successful detectives, and the case of our survival is still being written every single day. If you want to keep exploring these hidden corners of our history and biology, join us for our next investigation. There is always more to the story than what we see on the surface. We are a species built on the edge of a knife. As we close the file on how our ancestors identified safe food, we are left with a deeper appreciation for the simple act of eating. It is not just a biological necessity, it is a profound historical achievement. It is the end result of millions of years of observation, tragedy, and triumph. We have traced the evidence from the TAS2R38 gene to the cassava pits of the Amazon, and from the cautious hands of toddlers to the transformative power of the hearth. We have seen how we outsmarted the plant's defenses and turned their chemical weapons into our daily bread. This investigation shows that our most basic instincts are actually highly sophisticated survival tools, refined by the ultimate pressure of evolution. We are the ultimate omnivores because we are the ultimate learners. But as we move forward, we must ask ourselves if we are still paying attention to the lessons that kept us alive for so long. The map is in our hands, but we are the ones who have to choose where to walk next. The mystery of our survival in a world of poison is a testament to the power of human observation and the endurance of our collective memory. We didn't just stumble through the woods, we interrogated them. We used every tool at our disposal, from our taste buds to our fire, to carve out a space for ourselves in a world that didn't want us to eat. This story is the foundation of everything we are. It is the reason we can live in cities, the reason we can travel to the stars, and the reason we can enjoy a simple meal with friends. It is a story of courage and caution, written over 1,000,000 years. And as we look toward the future, we should remember the cost of that knowledge. We should remember that our safety is a privilege that was bought with the highest possible price. The history of our food is the history of our species, and it is a case that will never truly be closed as long as we are still here to tell the story. We have walked through the frost-bitten valleys of the past and the high-tech laboratories of the present to understand how we solved the riddle of safe food. We have seen how our biology and our culture worked in tandem to create a world where we no longer have to fear the forest. This investigation has shown us that our ancestors were far more than just primitive foragers. They were the architects of our survival, building a fortress of knowledge that has protected us for millennia. But as we step back into our modern lives, we are left with one final, haunting realization. We think we are safe because we have labels and regulations and grocery stores that look the same every day. We think we have escaped the brutal trial and error of the past. But the truth is, the test hasn't stopped. We've just changed the questions. Every bite you take is a vote for a future that our ancestors would never recognize, and a betrayal of the very sieves that allowed us to survive in the first place. You are still the lab rat in an experiment that hasn't finished yet. Your dinner is a graveyard.